Now, when we had the prayers of love and faith, which are the prayers to be used with same-sex couples in a committed relationship who want to have some sort of blessing, not of course on their relationship, because we can't bless that, but on the individuals in it, being Church of England is all about these weird balancing things, which are just rubbish. When that came in, the mass media went with a sort of Church of England accepts gay blessings thing without noticing, yeah, okay, but only if it's in an existing service, not if it's a separate service, because that might look a bit like a wedding, because people might sort of dress up and have people come round to join in, and maybe there might be flowers and rings. Oh no, we can't do rings. No rings. So actually there was excitement, but it was misplaced. We had not done very much, but it got in there in the media. Similarly, if we have a debate in the Church of England or even a question on it about God and gender and gendered language for God, you can bet your life that if someone says anything about gendered language for God, it'll be on the front pages. Everyone will be interviewing you saying, is that all right? Is God a girl? Is that okay? And you're like, just please. So what the Church of England says does have impact beyond the Church of England. And I think that's why it's important that we do the right thing. Now, as you've heard from Judith, I was part of the history working group in the Living in Love and Faith process. I want to start by saying something about whether that was a safe process. So here's the Church of England talking about gender identity and sexuality and marriage. How do you even get onto that? Well, Judith said she was sort of selected somehow because people know she's great, right? Judith said, I think I got this right, Judith, she said to them, are there any other girls in that group? And they said, oh, no. And Judith said, don't like that, not having that. And they said, do you know any girls who work on sort of sexuality stuff? And we've been friends for 40, 50 years or something ridiculous. We're both very old. So she suggested me, because I do work on the history of the body, and kind of that's important. So even how you get into a group in the Church of England is a mystery. Currently, we're starting the process of appointing a new Bishop of Oxford. No, he's not going yet, but he has to go in 15 months because of his age. So that's the way it goes. So you have a thing called a Vacancy in C Committee, VISC. We do like our acronyms. We have a VISC. And that VISC includes ex officio members like me and Judith, because we're on General Synod, various people who hold offices in the diocese because they're ex officio, elected people, and that was a tricky one in terms of finding people to stand for the places when they don't even know what the thing is, elected people, and appointed people. Now, I have asked the question, how are these people appointed? Because when you meet them, you think they're rather, how should we say, another member of VISC here, sort of rather evangelical, rather conservative. Yes, so Serena also on this. And you think, okay, so they select somebody else because they think that the racial balance is wrong. They could be right about that. The age balance is wrong, also probably right about that. But they appoint people. And that, I think, is the Bishop's Council who makes that decision. So it's people they know. So this is the way the Church of England is so difficult to do anything with, because it's people you know. If you happen to be one of those people, like Judith says, my friend Helen does history of bodies, then that's great. But if you're not one of the people who's known to someone else, you could be just perfect for a role and nobody knows about you. Now, back to Living in Love and Faith. At one stage in the process, fairly early on, we were all asked if we'd like to declare our sexuality. Well, I really like it's a bit. But then again, I have sometimes, it's a very strange question to ask. We were told the other working groups had declared their sexuality. So that's pressure, isn't it? Oh, you're going to be the awkward group. Well, we remained the awkward group because we didn't see why the history group needed to declare their sexuality. I realized afterwards why they wanted us to declare our sexuality. It was so they could do a little count at the end and say, this is how many people are whatever. And then they could say, well, we're not doing the no talking about us without us thing, because we've got, very small number of lesbian, gay, and trans people in this group. So that's sort of all right. So it was only really to salve their conscience or something. But clearly, the Church of England is not a safe place. Otherwise, why would gay bishops be unwilling to say that they're gay? The only out gay bishop, Bishop Nick, is only out because the papers were about to out him. This is not right. So if you're in somewhere where it's not a safe place even to say what your sexuality is, even when it's relevant, which it mostly isn't, how can this possibly be a good place to discuss this even? So after years and years of writing the book, the LLF book, the big one, and producing the videos continued, two moments stand out for me here. One was when our one trans person, who was there as a consultant, not as a member of the group, walked out because she was sick of the whole thing. Being the only trans person present, it just wasn't a good vibe at all. She didn't feel she was being listened to. She didn't feel there was any point in her being there, so she left. Credit. The other moment that stands out was when Marcus Green, vicar in this diocese, asked the question of the group as a whole at a residential day. Yes, we had whole days of this. Do you think I'm human? And there was a sort of ooh around the room, the indrawn breath. And he said, because you're saying that anybody else, anyone who's straight, can fall in love with someone and marry them. And you're saying that I'm gay, so I can't. So do you think I'm human? And people were very upset by that question, but it was a very good question. He's since written about it on his blog, which is called The Possibility of Difference. So if you want to follow up Marcus Green on saying that, look at his blog, Possibility of Difference. Now, living in love and faith was notoriously the result of the 2017 Church of England's General Synod's decision to not take note of a report which came from the House of Bishops on how to move forward with inclusion of LGBTQIA+ people. It's a very formal thing, a take note debate. It doesn't mean that you sort of approve everything, you've just noted it. Like, we noticed that. So when Synod said, no, we don't take note of that, it was a bit of a moment. It was the report was part of a long series of short and long reports over nearly 50 years by the Church of England on what they think we should do about LGBTQIA+ people. And it's what we should do about them, never we are too. It's never, never, never. So there's been no apparent movement. What normally happens is a report comes to Synod. Synod sort of takes note and then puts it in the back drawer or something, like we won't need to look at that again. Or someone passes a motion that actually undermines what the report said, and then you just move on, and nothing is settled. Simple things. Can lesbian and gay people be married in church? No. My congregation, I'm in an ordinary market town in Oxfordshire, find it quite extraordinary. They seem to think we've done this already. And you say, no, we haven't, honestly. Can such a couple have a blessing? Yes, if it's in the course of an existing service, using a rather bland form of words, which is called the prayers of love and faith. But that's it. Can clergy who are in same-sex marriages, legal marriages, continue to be clergy? No. They can continue in their current role, but they can't be licensed to another role. It's basically the kiss of death. So why in that case can clergy be in civil marriages in the Church of England? Because civil partnerships. Civil partnerships are fine. Civil marriages are not, because in civil partnerships, there isn't any sex. Never know how long to leave for a pause there, but it's, whereas in marriage, of course, it's non-stop sex all the time. I have special dispensation from my husband to be let out today. So this is the level we're talking. This is the level, and being in a room with, trying to keep a straight face, or indeed a gay face, with people who are saying this, really, you have to suddenly get a coughing fit and leave the room. So the report that we didn't take note of in 2017 was called Marriage and Same-Sex Relationships After the Shared Conversations. A gripping title. After the shared conversations, you ask? Well, shared conversations were a response to a previous report on sexuality. They were a highly organised set of events taking place across the Church of England in 2015 to 2017, bringing together people with different views on sexuality and gender identity. I was a rep for Oxford. Oxford Diocese, let's hear it for Oxford Diocese, did this properly. They put various little adverts in diocesan publications and on the web and so on, saying, if you think you could be a delegate to this, write in and let the bishops know. So I wrote in and said, hello, I know I'm only a straight white woman who's cis, but I do work on the history of the body. I could probably have something useful to say here. Then you wrote an exciting long sheet of A4 on everything about you. So you have a go at that. And then they said yes. So I was on Diocesan Shared Conversations. I was so excited. I was so naive. So other dioceses, I think, did the usual, oh, we know this person, they'll be all right method. But Oxford certainly did this properly. As a straight married ally, I found the shared conversations draining, but also inspiring. I heard great stories from great people. I met people who have become friends for life. I was shocked to find out that there were people in the room who didn't believe that a woman can preach. I am an authorized lay preacher, so kind of invested in that. I sort of knew that already, but I didn't imagine I'd meet loads of them in this room. And we're talking about a several days residential experience, so it's not like you can go home and just have a laugh about it. You're still there. I also met people who don't believe you can be married if you've got a partner who's divorced with their former partner still living. Well, that's me. Okay, so my marriage is void then, is it? Thanks. It's not as bad as being told that you're gay and or lesbian and you can never marry, but it's sort of on the same spectrum. I like spectrums. I also was aware that some of the things I hadn't really thought about were coming to the fore, like, so no clergy in same-sex marriage, but clergy person with a lay partner, that means that lay partner can't be married either. And that doesn't seem right. I sort of imagined all clergy, gay clergy marry each other, but that, which, sort of is true to some extent, but it does happen. There are mixed marriages, lay and clergy. I hadn't really registered any of that. I also hadn't registered how many people in the room would think that the reason why some people have intersex characteristics is because of the fall. I know. So we had an exciting evening session where you could pick a topic and you could suggest it to the group, and with various ones turned up. One guy wanted to write up the whole of one of the Gospels on a whiteboard for the evening activity. He was alone. I suggested we have a little talk about people with intersex characteristics, because I think that's one of the interesting aspects about why you can't say it's all a binary, because it isn't. And in that room, people said, oh, well, it's all the result of the fall, isn't it? What? So there were shocks all the way through. But I also realized this is the positive thing about shared conversations. I realized our stories were not simple. So the way shared conversations worked was over the several days, you started with a table of people sort of randomly, and you had conversations and you had writing stuff up on giant post-it notes and sticking them around the wall. This is the Church of England, the home of the post-it note. So we did all that. But then we gradually moved down to groups of 9 to have another discussion. At some point we went away and wrote down our sexual story on a piece of paper. How long have you got? And we were then supposed to just sort of keep that in mind, but maybe share it or maybe not. I didn't. But when we got down to the group of 9, then we had to pick a group of 3 within it. And it was done by sort of standing along, moving a bit like I'm not going near him, until eventually you got people in groups of 3. And then we went away for, I think it was an hour and a half, and told each other everything about our lives. It was fabulous. We all cried. Everyone in my group cried. I mean, there was quite a good pause afterwards to recover from the crying. But it was just being honest with people who were completely different in their views, but we were all being honest. Somehow that was created. Why? Because they did a thing which is very clever. They had trained facilitators who had been facilitating things like the Northern Ireland peace talks. That's what you need in the Church of England if you want an honest conversation about sexuality. So that made a massive difference. However, that didn't necessarily mean it worked when you got to General Synod. The Marriage and Same-Sex Relationships report that we didn't take note of mentioned the shared conversations in its preamble as helping to prepare us all to address the challenges we face. Just remember the language here, challenge. You know, two people love each other and want to get married. Challenge? I still don't see that as a challenge. And also it's waffle. Help to prepare us all. No, not everyone on Synod took part in their diocesan shared conversations. There was a pared down version of a few hours rather than several days, which General Synod was invited to do. Sort of shared conversations light. What was the point of that? Many members of Synod from the LGBTQIA+ community didn't take part because they didn't feel safe. Would you? No. It's bad enough in any small group work in General Synod, but this, small group work, and you're talking about your sexuality, just no. So I don't think the shared conversations prepared anything. They were great for those of us who went on them, but I don't think they changed anything else. The report, Marriage and Same-Sex Relationships, was very big on the bishop's claims that they recognised their deficiencies and that they'd spent a lot of time in prayer, because clearly that makes a difference. And clearly nobody else spends a lot of time in prayer. It's that I do find the language of the Church of England and the church generally quite irritating here. It's like, well, we've prayed for longer than you have, so God's going to listen to us. I mean, I know I'm making a joke of it, but there is really something of that going on there. It's rather like, I hate to mention conversion practices here, but it's rather like the idea that, you know, if people have prayed over you and you're still gay, then somehow there's something wrong with you because they prayed, so surely it must have happened. I find that really repulsive. The report, Marriage and Same-Sex Relationships, started with a nod to the Bible, but it's an odd one. I'm thinking of it this morning when Andrew was talking about his experience with the Stop Crucifying Queers demonstration from Outrage. Galatians 2:19 onwards, on Paul being crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, it is Christ who lives in me. I felt that a reference to us as crucified was not boding well for what the report was going to do to LGBTQIA+ Anglicans. Then there was also the standard Anglican mention of scripture, tradition, and reason, developing reason here as the ways that changing approaches to human knowledge and reason inform or challenge the Christian faith as we have received it. Change, of course, part of that's rather weird. I'll do it again because it's so weird. The ways that changing approaches to human knowledge and reason inform or challenge the Christian faith as we have received it. Change. So we're allowed to change human knowledge. That's why we had a history group, a social sciences group. But that can then inform or challenge the Christian faith as we have received it. But for many people involved in this, change is not possible by definition. And they don't accept that there's been any change in history. In the history group, one thing we found amazing was the way that history appeared to have started in 1960. That was the way the shared conversations played it. In terms of the sort of pictures around the room during shared conversations, everything was 1960 onwards, contraception, you know, it's all 60s, 60s. People had contraception for years, centuries. Might not have worked very well. Sometimes it did. Like not doing it at all is a very good method. But you know, it's the idea that nothing actually changed. History began yesterday. And apart from that, church has been exactly the same all the way through. And, you know, Dermot McCulloch is particularly brilliant on this in terms of church marriage and how late it was that the church got involved in marriage at all. The rest of the marriage and same-sex document read a bit like a balancing act or perhaps a juggling performance. It was all about how difficult it was for the bishops to hold it together. I know. And Anglicanism is a contested tradition. And of course, Canon B30, marriage is in its nature a union permanent and lifelong, for better for worse, till death them do part, of one man with one woman for the procreation and nurture of children. Till recently, I didn't think anyone in the church thought the absence of children meant it wasn't a marriage, but recently I have read that has turned up again, that actually that is what marriage is for. Okay. Try doing it without a womb is all I can say there. Hysterectomy, a lot of it about, a lot of older women exist. A lot of people just don't. People don't want to. And of course, there was also the 2005 statement on civil partnerships, which had stated that sexual relationships outside marriage fall short of God's purposes for human beings. Whatever sexual relationships mean. Of course, the church is not great at engaging with what sex is. Sometimes it seems to think there must be a penis and a vagina in the room, and that they must have been present from birth, not just any old penis and vagina. But then sometimes they don't seem to think that you need one of each, because otherwise gay people don't have sex full stop. So very odd. Bishops claimed that this document, marriage and same-sex relationships rejected, moved us towards a fresh tone of culture, of welcome and support. Now, nobody, I know, you can't make that up, can you? No one has found that convincing. And they said that the bishop said they seek to make steps together, 2017, that allow us to act together while retaining doctrinal coherency. Have we seen any of these steps? I'm afraid not. So after the failure to take note of this awful, awful report, the bishops rapidly in Church of England terms, came up with the Living in Love and Faith process, intended to produce a radical new Christian inclusion. Again, it's one of those really great jokes, isn't it? A radical new Christian inclusion. Have you noticed that since 2017? Neither have I. Yet, a few years into that process, Marcus was still needing to ask if people thought he was human. When the big LLF book was published, it came up with what Marcus reckoned was a very good answer, and I agree with him. I quote from the LLF book: "No human being is worth more than another because of their gender, the color of their skin, their bodily characteristics, their abilities, their sexuality, their marital status, or even their stance in the church's debates about identity, sexuality, relationships, and marriage. The ideas we are discussing now, however, push us to go beyond that. Human diversity is to be welcomed and celebrated. The love of God is displayed in human lives, not despite their being different, but in and through their differences." And that's so good, I'll read it again. "The love of God is displayed in human lives, not despite their being different, but in and through their differences." It went on, "The infinite glory of God is imaged in and through the intimate pattern of human lives in all their colors and shapes and sizes, and what we see would be diminished if that variety were to be absent." Now, when LLF started, the logo was one of a tree. I got quite entertained by the tree because it looked a bit like the roots were not going to last, and it didn't look like the most secure tree you've ever seen in your life. There was no fruit on it and no bird would touch it. And, I wasn't good about the tree. Somewhere in this process, they changed from the tree to a stained glass window, which at the time I thought was a bit churchy, much as I like stained glass windows. But when I think about it, that stained glass window was supposed to do this, human lives in their colors and shapes and sizes. That's why we went for the window that refracts different light through different colors, which is quite good, really. So it's not just about accepting people who are different from us, whoever we happen to be. It's a positive imperative to be different, to rejoice in difference. And this is progress for the Church of England. Remember the dreadful issues in human sexuality, now binned by General Synod vote last July. Yay! At 1991, issues in human sexuality were still speculating about one day finding and breeding out a gay gene. 1991 Church of England official document. So, there is some progress. It's terrifying. We count that as progress, but there is some progress. But as Judith has described, in the discussions at Exeter, in the various lessons learned reviews of safeguarding cases, there is still an unease about some of us. Judith's paper talked about trivializing abuse, the risk of trivializing abuse in the recent history of the church, that if it was between two men or a man and a boy, somehow it just doesn't really count, it's just not significant. It's not really abuse. No one died. It's that sort of, what exactly are you saying is okay here and what isn't? There have also been evidence from the various reviews that some people have not wanted to report abuse because they feel vulnerable, that if it's two men involved, or a man and a younger man, or a man and a boy, there are other things. So, for example, with the John Smythe abuse, it was clear there that one of the reasons why parents, becoming aware that something bad was going on, didn't want to go further with reporting it is because of fear that their child would be labelled as gay. Well, if you're in a culture where that is considered bad, you can see why abuse cases were not taken as seriously as they should be. It's all wrong. So there's a lot going on here. And I think one of the things that's going on is our readiness to go through for polarities over spectrums. Andrew's already talked about left or right, sheep or goats, or do you just go straight ahead and talk to the people who are the survivors or who are the protesters? Straight ahead. Church tradition is all about sheep and goats, about who's in and who's out, about are you saved or are you not saved, about a moment of conversion where everything changes. But for many of us, nothing has ever been that simple. In our faith, we still experience doubts. In our lives, we screw up, despite our commitment to following Jesus. We tend to live more in the fuzzy edges, the places where the Venn diagrams overlap, both in and out. And I think that's what life is like. But if you're into polarities, you want to know, are you in or out? Have you been saved? Have you not? Are you damned? Who's a boy? Who's a girl? If someone isn't entirely conforming, if they don't look quite right, whatever that means to you, you want to push harder and insist they make their minds up. And if they won't, if they insist that's simply who they are, if you love polarities, you may well push even harder to the point where you end up telling them that they're damned, or they have to go through some sort of process to somehow rid them of this uncertainty about identity. And this is also demonstrated in how we read the Bible. When the Shared Conversations was set up, and again when Living in Love and Faith was set up, it was originally suggested all the problems went back to how we read the Bible. And I think the LLF book should be commended here for avoiding the polarity of literal versus non-literal, or right way of reading the Bible, wrong way. The book offered a spectrum, yay, of 7 different ways of reading the Bible. And it looked at history to see how the Bible has been read in earlier cultures as well, earlier forms of our culture and other cultures. All 7 were presented as valid in the book. There was no, this one's no good. That section should be quoted more. And the book makes the point that even the most literal reader would still agree that some passages should not be taken literally. So, Song of Songs, the classic example, what's that about? Here, a conservative reader would be going for a non-literal reading, because it can't really be about people enjoying sex, can it? Or indeed using each other's bodies in a more violent way. You know, there are different things going on in Song of Songs. Surely it must be an allegory of Christ and his church. But a less conservative reader may want to claim it as a story of sexual pleasure and an undertone of sexual violence. So I don't think it is about the Bible, and I think that was a red herring. But I now want to turn a bit to how safeguarding plays out at Synod, and Judith's done a lot of this, so I won't have to do all of it. She's been through how lessons learned reviews have now been called safeguarding practice reviews. Wow, that was a real big one, wasn't it? But lessons learned, the education terminology is so misleading. There's also the thing about marking your own homework. Well, I wrote a blog piece about this, about how actually in education, marking your own homework is considered a rather useful practice, because you're actually much harsher about your own work than an independent reader might be. So actually marking your own homework could be quite useful. Now, I've been asking, along with Judith, the National Safeguarding team for years whether anyone actually looks at all these lessons learned reviews to see what's going on. Only a month ago, I found out that the National Safeguarding team has a Deputy Director for Learning and Development, and it's her responsibility to look at the lessons learned reviews and find the common lessons. Bishop Joanne, lead safeguarding bishop, wrote to me recently, the National Safeguarding Steering Group, that's the other, there's so many structures, just don't. National Safeguarding Steering Group has requested a thematic review of all LLRs and SPRs over the last 5 years. Yay. When? This work, she said, is currently underway. And we are hopeful that the themes will be learning that we can share publicly. Well, why shouldn't they be learning we can share publicly? What is the point of, back to Judith's comment on my question on the Reed sisters, what is the point of a review that's kept within the diocese? But the current official handbook on doing these reviews says the report or an executive summary in exceptional circumstances such as those described below must be published on relevant Church of England websites. But when you read the definition of exceptional circumstances, it includes things like the review was not carried out very well, or the survivors don't want it published, or, and yes, but in a case like the Reed sisters, where the survivors have all publicly announced themselves, what is the problem? I'm still working on that. Now, Synod can do things. It doesn't do that many of them. It can pass things, so like legislation, the redress scheme, which is coming along. There are usually briefings, but very slowly. There are usually briefings before a big debate like that, so we can meet not just members of the safeguarding teams, but also survivors. The problem there is, of course, we meet some survivors, but not others. And of course, like everybody else, survivors don't agree on things, because why would they? You know, why is just because you're a survivor, you've only got one view? It doesn't work like that. So we get some input. We've also heard about presentations. Judith mentioned how you can get a presentation made where there's no debate, but we can ask questions. But you've seen from her handout the sort of vagueness you get in the answer. Not great. There are also private members' motions. The question was asked earlier, as an ordinary person, what can I do about Synod? You know, can I get a question in? Apart from the fact you can ask one of us to feed one in. We're only allowed 2 per session, so we have to be a bit picky, but we can sometimes farm them out to other people. That's the way it goes. Some groups actually have a list of questions and then send out to their little subgroup in Synod the list and say, anyone want to take these? So it is quite an open process. So we can do that. We can also do a private members motion, which needs signatures from 100 members to be considered to go on the agenda. A private members motion has to be cleverly worded so that it'll get through the legal office. We have experience. But it's problematic because, as Judith said, there are still people who are claiming we're weaponizing safeguarding. And it's not something where you can guarantee you'll get across the Synod lots of people signing. However, I'm the chair on Synod of Together on General Synod, which is the synodical outworking of Together for the Church of England. If you don't know about Together for the Church of England, see me, I can get you signed up. Diocesan group meets on Zoom and actually met in person last weekend. All good. We work for inclusion in every way because every inclusion equally matters. So we've been working on class recently and race, as well as on sexuality and gender. So you can get 100 signatures because we've got over 100 members. So if they all decided, yes, that's very much our sort of thing, they go for it. So that's something else that we can do. And of course, questions. You've seen Judith's superb example of questions where you just keep on banging your head against the same brick wall. But you know, sometimes you get somewhere. It's very, very difficult to know what the best method of doing this is. And the thing I want to say here is Synod is tired. Synod is very tired. We're coming to the end of a 5-year election quinquennium. We're on for 5. Next elections next year, this sort of time. And we're all shattered because it's been non-stop on LLF and on safeguarding all through that period, as well as other things like money, and archbishops and all sorts of things. We are tired. We also feel got at, I think. Synod feels quite got at in terms of we haven't done anything sort of amazing that gets people going, thank you so much for that, apart from getting rid of issues in human sexuality, which got a lot of enthusiasm and made us feel that we actually did achieve something. We are quite battered. And when debates come up, of course, they are timed according to what the Business Committee also has on the agenda. So if you time a debate to be at 9 p.m, yes, we have debates at 9 p.m. In the York Synod, people are likely to be needing to go and lie down in a darkened room by then. So it's not always easy to get the sort of vote that we need on safeguarding matters. And then there are bodies. Final thing, bodies. Many, many times, Jane Ozanne and I and others have stood up and said, what do you mean by sex, Synod? We inevitably get one of two answers. Either don't be so prurient, or we all know perfectly well. Do we? Are we all talking about the same thing? Lovers of polarities also rather like that line about how far can you go? So touching here is okay, that's not sex. Touching there isn't okay. Many of us grew up in church youth groups where the leaders were probably fed up with the number of times we asked, how far can you go? But haven't we grown up a bit since then? Maybe we could move beyond the sort of approach that reduces the body to a set of parts which are either okay or not okay, and which reduces pleasure to a sort of programmed set of responses to set stimuli. And there's an important point here. At church youth groups, it was only ever safe to ask questions, I think, about girls with boys, unless you had a really, really exciting church youth group, which I very much doubt you did. But none of this is just about gay sex, actually. For conservatives within the Church of England, particularly on the evangelical wing, all forms of heterosexual activity outside straight marriage, as well as sex between partners who count as the same sex, count as sin. Now, my clergy friends tell me that the number of times they've ever married a couple, a straight couple, where they didn't have the same address is beyond fingers of one hand. It just doesn't really happen. But if you say that in Synod, we get the sort of shame comments around the room. It's quite extraordinary to be in this world, which is so unlike anything else I encounter. So just as I'm about to end, I'm just going to say something from something I wrote for a short piece for Theo Hobson's recent book, God Beyond Gender. God Beyond Gender has sort of 3,000 word contributions from various people across the Church of England, including some bishops. I wrote about Maud Royden, feminist and preacher. I knew about Maud really as first woman to preach in the Church of England, a Church of England church, but she's a really interesting example of how real life relationships are far more complicated than the polarity gang like to admit. Royden wrote, "We had not enough knowledge of life or of the human heart to guess of what it is capable in love, nor how many ways there are of loving." Maud Royden married very late in life, after the man she loved was widowed. Before that, she lived with him and his wife. The husband, the Reverend George William Hudson Shaw, as a curate, had written, "Whether I shall retain my orders in this respectability-ridden, comfortable, damnable establishment is more than I can say. He is my hero." Shaw's wife, Effie, refused to have sex with him after the birth of their child. Maud Royden wrote that she and Shaw loved each other at first sight, her words, in 1901. And she wrote of Effie, "I fell in love with her too, at first sight. If she'd not loved me and I her, what happened afterwards would have been impossible." Effie's wish for Maud and her husband was not love only, but passionate love. And she told them they should marry when she died. And they did in 1944, when Maud was 68 and Shaw 85. So what was passionate love for Shaw and Maud? We can't know. They wrote of the lack of fulfillment, the strain of incompletion, but also the absence of, quote, any guilty secret. But reducing this to how far can we go misses the point entirely. This was love, and passionate love at that. And yes, Maud's expression of love for Effie is part of a historical moment in which women like her, admitted to Oxford University, to Lady Margaret Hall, feel free to speak of their love for each other, in which Effie and her dear, dear friend Kathleen wrote to each other, recalling that Sunday we walked round the parks hand in hand and smiled insanely. Kathleen later wrote that their friendships were not lesbian, but do we need to keep labeling complexity? I think there's something much bigger about bodies and relationships and emotions that we just don't go near because we're so obsessed with our polarities. Finally, I notice you've got Vile Bodies on the list of books available on the virtual bookstall. Vile Bodies by Adrian Thatcher is a great book because it talks about how bodies of different kinds, women, gays, black, disabled bodies, are not considered worth as much in our tradition. I think that's important because what happens to LGBTQIA plus people in safeguarding, terrible as it is also a symptom of a wider unease with bodies in the church. Yet our faith is built on bodies, on God taking on flesh, on Jesus suffering on the cross with all other victims of hatred and injustice. Yet the church continues to act as if straight white middle class male bodies are the only ones that really matter. I think it's very significant that our new Archbishop to come has spoken publicly about the microaggressions that she experiences as a woman leading in the Church of England. So I want to suggest that the real reasons, the real issues behind this appalling safeguarding situation relate to an unwillingness to accept the rich spectrum of history, an unease with the body, combined with a failure to understand that love is spiritual, emotional, and physical. So can we simply respect each other as people who affirm the incarnate God and who have made the decision to try to follow God's way? Because we're never going to be safe until we're all safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Laughter is such a beautiful gift when we talk about such painful issues. Thank you. You bring the gift of laughter. Well, questions? Andrew.
Just checking.
I just want to say three very tiny things. The first is thank you to you and Judith and others. Rosie's been there, and others who kind of serve on General Synod and other bits of the Church of England, for all of us. Thank you. The second is, if you would like to see the suppressed LLR review of the Reed sisters, I've got it in my bag.
So have I.
That's the journalist in me. And the third is just to add something to perhaps clarify a narrative that has been running around the John Smythe story. My book about John Smythe's on the back table at the back. There's been a narrative since 1982 that says that the reason that Smythe's abuses were not made public or taken to the police was because either the young men or their parents didn't want them to be taken forward. And that was used then, and it was used again in the 1990s, and it's been used again in the last 5 years. And in all the work that I've done, I've found no evidence at all.
That's interesting.
That is the case.
Yeah.
But it's a story that has been used again and again by the leaders of the conservative evangelical church in order to say that's why these things mustn't be made public.
Wow.
So I haven't found evidence that that's the case.
Well, thank you very much for that. Stunned silence.
Online. There's a question and a follow-up question from Paul online. Oh wait, one of them's a comment. Okay, so the question he has is, how do we deal with the fact church hierarchy seems to be so out of touch with the reality of life in towns, cities and villages? Well,
in so many ways. Yeah, well, we have to keep telling them. We have to keep talking to them. We need to make sure that they are not in a bubble, that they are talking to people outside the church. I think one of the big things here is if you're in the church bubble, it's very hard to find any time or energy to do anything outside it. Those of us who are functioning in normal parishes do stuff that isn't church stuff. Some people, some ordinary Christians don't do anything that isn't church stuff. All their groups, everything they belong to is church stuff. And that, I think, fosters this idea that, you know, the world is a dreadful place full of horrid, nasty stuff, and we are pure, we are the remnant, we are the only ones who are going to be saved. And that is dangerous. That is dangerous, particularly since, you know, in the parish system in the Church of England, we're supposed to be open to everybody. So I think getting out there, how do you get your bishops to go out there, though? Find out, does your bishop do anything that isn't church? And I don't count going for long walks in the countryside. It's very good, but an awful lot of bishops seem to say that their exercise is going for a walk with the dog. I approve of walking with dogs, but I would like them to talk to people who aren't church. Trouble is, if you're a bishop and everyone knows it, you know, could they go out in mufti? There must be methods. You don't have to wear your collar all the time. So that would be my answer.
Helen, I know this is a huge question and it's sort of psychology and sociology and all sorts of things, but what is it that causes people to feel that they are not all right before God unless they control the lives of other people to conform to their will? What's actually going on in their head? Why can't they say, I'm right with what I'm doing before God, you do your stuff?
I think you need a good psychologist for that one. It is very odd, isn't it? It's the projecting it onto everybody else. I mean, you can see it from the sort of basic evangelical, conservative evangelical viewpoint that, you know, if you're not saved, that's it, you're going to hell. So our job is to make sure that if you're not saved, you are saved. And therefore we have to go out and make you, and the only way you can be saved is if you're going to be like us, therefore, you know, it's actually a need to accept that there are different ways of being church, that not everyone is suited by a particular style of worship. For example, you know, we don't have to all have worship bands going at high volume without any idea of when the hymn's going to stop. That was, you can tell I have been there, but for some people, clearly that's what floats their boat. But we don't all have to have it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the other thing that worries me a lot is any attempt to make the Church of England into just a Holy Trinity from beginning to end. You know, that's not going to work for many people at all. It's just not how they're going to find their way to God. But then similarly, you know, if every service was a sort of quiet Taizé one, some people would be out of there. You can't make us the same. We are diverse. And that's really what it gets down to. Diversity, for some reason, is offensive. I don't know.
Thank you,
It's
Helen.
dangerous.
I wondered, I mean, we've been talking a lot about conservative evangelical. We've been talking about people who aren't in the room, I assume.
Well, I don't know.
Conservative
Many of us have had
maybe-
experience. Yeah.
Indeed. But also, I mean, coming from the Anglo-Catholic
Yes.
side of things, I mean, one of the things that's really happened in my adult life is that the strength of the Anglo-Catholic wing, I think, has diminished.
Yes.
And the strength of the evangelical wing has grown. But do you have any insights about the opposition to, because the Forward in Faith bishops on Synod all vote against moving on LLF. Do you have any insight into how that works within that particular culture?
It's very hard.
Other people here who might have views on that.
Yeah, it's very hard to know, isn't it? So when I was on Synod in my 20s, when we did ordination of women, there was only one Catholic group on Synod. So I was in it because it was the only one. I was the only person in Catholic group on Synod, I think, who voted for the ordination of women and who also belonged to the movement for the ordination of women. And I have definite evidence that on one occasion, a briefing about voting against the ordination of women was sent out and I didn't get it because they didn't want me to know in case I leaked it. So that was interesting. But now we have Affirming Catholicism, which is pretty lively on Synod, the group who affirm women's full ministry, and also, not all, but almost all, I should think, are in favour of full inclusion of LGBTQIA plus people. And we have Catholic group, which is quite tiny, really is tiny. And I don't know what's happened there. Is it just that there are other ways of being Catholic on Synod now, rather than having to go for the very sort of narrow line? But then there are, of course, always reasons why people don't agree with something that are not the same reason. I don't know if you've ever done that exercise where you get people to stand in various positions on a subject like fruit or chocolate, and you put all the fruit up there and the chocolate, and then the people in the middle. And then you ask them, why are you standing there? And some of the fruit people say, well, I'm standing here because actually I hate fruit. So why are you standing at fruit? Well, because I'm not really allowed chocolate because I've got diabetes now. So I thought I'd stand at fruit. And you think, well, never guessed that. Same thing with different positions in the church. People hold them for different reasons. So some people in the traditional Catholic wing will be saying that what they're holding out for here is union with Rome. And until Rome does it, they'll never do it. So there'll be anti-women priests until Rome does it. And until Rome comes up with something more positive about LGBTQIA plus people, they won't be going there either. So there are different reasons, I think, but it is an interesting phenomenon. Yeah. And of course, there is obviously a really odd thing about the conservative evangelicals and the traditional Catholics, I'm going to say it, getting into bed together on this, because but not having sex. So true. Thank you for that. So it's a very, very odd situation because they disagree on so many things, but on this one, they've decided to come together. It's fascinating how this works.
Just to scare you all, I'm a conservative evangelical
Hey.
charismatic, but I'm in recovery.
Yes.
I've just got a quick question. I read an article which said, is living in love and faith coming to an end?
Yes.
And this worried me a little bit because I think, well, they haven't actually
Correct.
done anything yet. So is there a danger that it's going to be prematurely sort of wound up before they've actually got any progress?
I think it's making so little progress now, you might as well wind it up, frankly. Because the idea is that they would then do something like say, okay, we still haven't done anything about this, so we'll have a separate working party to do something about this, which then puts it off for another 20 years. But at the moment, all that's on the table is freestanding services of prayers of love and faith. And that may or may not come to synod in February. The bishops are discussing it today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, and then again in December. And the other thing is clergy in existing same-sex marriages, will they be allowed to continue as clergy? There doesn't, at the moment, for people entering the discernment and ordination process who are in a same-sex marriage, because you could have entered a same-sex marriage before you became Christian. And what you're going to say to someone who offers for ordination then, sorry, you've got to get divorced. I don't think so. So there's so little on the table at the moment, but it's been crumbs all the way. And the only crumb that we have left, really, that we managed to achieve, well, 2 crumbs, getting rid of issues was quite good. But in terms of practical stuff that affects people in everyday churches, it's prayers of love and faith in an existing service. We still have that. It's not a lot. And we were told we were having freestanding services, and then it sort of went, oh, maybe not. Oh, code of practice. Oh, we need this. Ooh. And everything just disappears again. And this matters. This really matters because it all contributes to the idea that LGBTQIA plus people are not somehow human. It's back to that again.
We're now over time, but we're going to allow one more question online. Josh.
Yeah, I've got a question from Janet online who asks, do you think it is helpful or not to create perhaps an illusion that the church, more than any other institution, could ever be fully safe? Is it not better to require leaders to stop othering unsafeness and acknowledge that in certain circumstances, any person in power has the potential to cause harm?
Okay, it's very true. So very, very true that power is the problem, and we've heard that already today. Power is the issue, and you can always abuse power if you've got it. But just a culture in which it's clear that some sorts of things that have been done to LGBTQIA plus people are not acceptable and never will be. That would be progress, as far as I can see. So I think there is hope there. But yes, paying attention to power and embedding an understanding of power in the training of our priests. I mean, it's very good that we now have the psychological profiling. That sounds like criminals, doesn't it? There's another word for it, psychological. Someone must be involved in the ordination process. Psychological assessment, thank you, that's so much better. Psychological assessment of anyone entering, wanting to enter ministry. It's got to be a good thing. How we didn't do this before, I don't know, perhaps because we thought that modern knowledge of psychology wasn't relevant to the church. But I feel that someone like Ben Field, that the Stone Maids Walton person that Judith talked about, surely, goodness, he would have been picked up. Yes, because that's right, he was about to go to his selection conference, wasn't he? And they picked up something was wrong. So it is possible to filter out some of the more extreme ones. Oh, good grief, I hadn't heard that. Thank you for that, Rosie. I'd love to say you've made my day, but you just didn't. Oh.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
We've got 5 minutes. We are not having the parallel sessions. We've had 2 people pull out, they're ill. So Rebecca is going to do the next session. It is an absolutely superb session on the intersectionality of safeguarding. So tune in. 5-minute break, grab some fruit biscuit, loo break if you need it, back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you online.
Write down those. Is it inclusion equals safeguarding? Yeah. No, that's all sorted.
Yeah, I need to check it's working.
Got a mouse and button.
Yeah, that works. What I need to do then is so that is now sharing the 2.
Great. It's quite promotion, this. Promotion. Oh, to the main stage, yeah.